We are live.
We are live.
Right.
All right. Looks like it's just us chickens here tonight so far. Jim, you gonna kick us off?
I'll kick us off.
All right.
Let's see. I got to start here first. Okay, so you were talking about, you were in Matthew chapter 2 when you first started.
Right.
Okay, so let me go there. Okay, so chapter 2 is talking about Herod trying to find out secretively where the child was born so he could go worship him, but really he was going to take him out. The wise man find him anyway. The wise man then being divinely warned in a dream, so that they should not return to Herod, but depart to their own country another way. That started jumping off at me, and I looked. So I backed up all the way to chapter 1, where Christ was born, starting with verse 18. Now the birth of Jesus Christ was as follows. After his mother Mary was betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with child of the Holy Spirit. Then Joseph, her husband, being a just man and not wanting to make her a public example, because it was looking like she had sex with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
She was pregnant by somebody else. And not wanting to make a public example, was minded to put her away secretively. But verse 20, but while he thought about these things, while he was thinking that thought, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take to you Mary, your wife, for that which is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. And she will bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. So all this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the Lord the prophet, saying, behold, the virgin shall, behold, child, bear a son, call his name Emmanuel, which is translated God with us. Verse 24. Then Joseph, being aroused from sleep, did as the angel of the Lord commanded him, and took to him his wife, and did not know her, didn't have any sex with her until she had brought forth her firstborn son, and he called his name Jesus. So there is, first of all, he was warned. The Lord, while he was thinking the thought, the Lord interrupted his thought, interrupted him in his thinking, and told him what was going on. And then verse 24 is faith with works. So, or you could call that obedience. He heard God and he did what he said. Okay. So then into chapter 2, you were talking about Herod and how all that happened, and he wanted to secretly call the wise men, bring back word to me that I may come and worship him also, which he really had ulterior motives. And they found him and brought him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Okay, verse 12. Now he's now this is the wise men.
Mhm.
Then being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, but departed for their own country another way. So here's God talking to somebody else now in a dream.
Mhm.
Okay. And when they had departed, behold, angel of the Lord. Now, verse 13. Now, when they had departed, he just got done talking to the wise men. Now, when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, flee to Egypt and stay there until I bring you word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. So now Joseph is getting warned in a dream again, leadership of the Spirit. And when he arose, he took the child and his mother and departed and was there until Herod's death. Then, of course, Herod saw that he was deceived and got pissed off and killed them all, the kids from 2 years old and younger. Verse 19, now when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Arise, take the young child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the young child's life are dead. Then he arose and took, so see, he had stayed there just like the Lord said.
Mhm.
Then he arose, took the young child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that, I can't pronounce that, Archelaus or something was reigning over Judea instead of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned by God in a dream, he turned aside to another region of Galilee and came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, so that it might be fulfilled, which is spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene. So what kept jumping off to me was how God intervened and the leadership of the Spirit. Not only did he tell them, he told them, not only did they just hear God, he told them everything that was going to go down.
Mhm.
So I've had it happen to me a few times where he goes into detail like that. A lot of times he doesn't tell me the whys. I think a lot of times is because if you tell me, I'm just going to screw it up. I'm better off if I don't know.
Mm.
And I'm fine with that too. I like I like getting the direction, hearing his voice and getting his direction. I don't need to know why. But sometimes he tells me why. And it'll make you cry. A lot of times the things that we've done, my wife and I, he'll tell us why before we even go do it, and we're bawling because it's that good. It has to do with loving somebody else
Mhm.
and what it's going to do for them when you do it. And we're already crying before we even go do it. It's that good. So that's what jumped off was it was faith with works, and it was leadership of the Spirit over and over. And it wasn't just wise men or Joseph. It wasn't just in one place. It was wherever they were at, he was talking to them. And he just got done talking to the wise man. Now he's talking to Joseph. So he's in two places at the same time.
Mhm.
So there's the omnipresent characteristics of God. So then, let me go back. You got to the point where you were talking about Daniel and his three buddies. and they were devout for the Lord. And I was just about to look that up where you found it. And I looked up devout, and it means totally committed to a cause or belief.
Mm-hmm.
So you had said Daniel and his 3 buddies, devout for the Lord, refused to eat the king's food, willing to starve to death they were willing to starve to death for what they believed. And the Lord said to me, they refused to compromise. And then big bold letters, faith, that's faith.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't compromise their faith, their belief, even if it cost them their life.
Mm-hmm.
And it hit me. Yeah, I thought it had more than that. So it brings me to so many times I have being codependent. I have compromised myself and my beliefs to please somebody else, especially if it's somebody close to me, because I already know if I say what I need to say, I already know how they're going to react.
Mm-hmm.
So I just won't say it just to keep the peace, and you don't want to fight and you don't want to ruffle any feathers. When deep down inside you're dying because you haven't been saying what you need to say. Follow me? So that what has hit me is all the times that I have compromised myself, my faith, just to keep the peace or to please somebody else, rather than say what needs to be said if it costs me my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like these guys, right? Anyway, that was where I went. That's what hit me.
Well, I think what, this seems to be the common thread. There's a couple common threads in this, Jim, is that first of all, I think I find it interesting, and you brought it up, is that in each of these instances, God was speaking, to individuals through dreams. Even in Daniel's case, because he found favor with Nebuchadnezzar because he was able to accurately interpret Nebuchadnezzar's dreams. So
Right.
I find that interesting. But also, in each of these instances, these people were all under tremendous pressure. I mean, literally life or death, because I don't really know what the scripture really means in Matthew 1, where when Joseph discovered that Mary's pregnant, like, put yourself in his place. And even today, you're a young man, you're engaged, and she turns up pregnant, and it's not you. You may be able to salvage that relationship, you may not. But it's either way, it's very difficult. But Joseph was even under more pressure because they were Jews living under the law, and the penalty for adultery was, death. And when it says that he was considering how he was going to put her away privately or quietly, that's got to be going through his head. Under the law, I'm totally justified to kill her. And the Lord intervened. So it was a life or death thing there where the Lord spoke to Joseph, and then when Herod was trying to manipulate and use those wise men to pinpoint the location of Jesus, as you said, it was life or death, and and that's obvious because Herod went to great lengths to kill every male child in the region, the whole area, 2 years and under. It was definitely life or death. So, he at least saved the life of Jesus by speaking again in a life or death situation to those wise men in a dream. And then in a dream, he speaks to Joseph and, says, look, split the country. You got to get out of here. So that was life or death. And just as an aside, I think that the gifts that the wise men brought funded that trip to Egypt and that time down there, so the Lord used that too, so then it comes to Daniel, and his buddies. Let's set the episode with the fiery furnace aside because those were the same guys. It was life or death. They were committed, as you said, and the Lord, in the midst of that, used them. He used them to minister to Nebuchadnezzar, even though Nebuchadnezzar was not a believer. He was an adversary. He was, he had conquered the Holy Land and brought them all out as slaves. So then, he used Daniel and spoke to Daniel, on many occasions. And I really believe that Daniel had a tremendous impact on those magi, those wise men, and that literally that impact was so powerful that it made natural enemies. Because remember, these guys are Arabs. These guys are from the region of Saudi Arabia, Persia, Iraq. They're Arabs, and they would have their natural tendency would be to go hunt down the child to kill him. And for a long time, I considered whether their motives were pure or whether they were motivated by the dark side, because they practiced or understood the dark arts, astrology, fortune telling, magic, sorcery, all these things. And I thought, well, the devil would be using them to go hunt this Jesus down and kill him. But I had to dismiss that because of the way that they responded to first Herod, and then they were obedient when they were warned not, don't go that way, go another way home, get out of the country, go another way home. So yeah, these are all very interesting things to me. I just find it very fascinating and instructive. But my biggest thing is that in trying to track all this down and all the research that literally Matthew 2:1, there's so much there that I started tracking things down for a week, looking at that stuff, trying to understand who Herod was, trying to understand who these wise men were, and all that, trying to get some backstory to this, and I wondered to myself that, well, why is there a debate about the year Jesus was born? And why is there a debate about the day he was born? And finally, the Lord told me through that verse in Micah, which was the verse that when Herod went to the priests and the scribes, they said, what's the prophecy? And they said, well, it's Micah chapter 5, and at the end of that, he said, who has been from everlasting. This king is the king from everlasting. I said, that's the issue. That's the issue here. It's not as much when he was born as a human is who he really is. That's what really struck me. So, and that took me to John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And that was the connection that the Lord gave me through all of that. And there's still just a lot of fascinating details that can be looked at. But I think some of the details are purposely withheld from us because they might distract us from the real issues, and that's really what the Lord gave me on that.
Or it makes it like an exciting treasure hunt.
Yes. And
right?
He's the prize.
Right.
Yeah.
So starting with chapter 2, verse 1. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. How did they know he was King of the Jews? How did he know that a king was born?
Well, my conclusion is that it went back to Daniel because of Daniel's influence on their, let's call them a fellowship, for lack of a better word, these magi.
So Daniel was probably prophesied back then.
I'm sure he did. I mean, the whole book is a magnificent prophecy that goes all the way into the Revelation and everything.
Right.
I mean, it's mind-boggling the things that the Lord gave Daniel that he wrote down, and I think this is just one of them. And I think that Daniel had a tremendous impact on let's call them an order of these magi, and perhaps turn them from evil to good. And they were aware, and they were gifted with that knowledge of astrology, or not astrology, but astronomy. Studying these stars, living out in that desert where you have these really clear nights, and they kept track. I'll bet over centuries they kept track of the comings and goings of celestial bodies, and
right.
It made perfect sense that Daniel would say, look, this is a sign, and when you see it, you're going to know what's going to take place. And it didn't happen. Right. It did not happen overnight. I think that just like when certain planets line up, they did for several nights in a row, and I think their journey from their starting point may have taken weeks. That they're every night when it gets dark, that star comes up on the horizon, and they get their bearings and they go. That's their roadmap for the night. And I think this whole process took months, perhaps. And I think that also the clue is that Herod killed every male child from 2 years under. There's also another clue in there, and I don't want to go off too much on a tangent, but I didn't make an issue of it because this is so rich. There's so much there. But in verse 11 of Matthew 2, it says, when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And then they opened their treasures and, myrrh, gold, and frankincense. Well, it didn't say that they came into the stable. Like the Luke account of the night Christ was born. It said they came into the house. Well, by then, they were living in a house, apparently, unless that's just an interpretation or a translation detail, house or whatever. And they didn't say they saw the infant; they saw the young child. So Jesus perhaps could have even been a toddler by the time this story takes place.
Right.
Right. Which, and again, I don't want to be a humbug on the whole Christmas story and the nativity scenes where they mix in, the stable scene with the perhaps stable animals, and the shepherds certainly were part of that deal. And then these wise men. Those two scenes probably are not
Right.
the same scene, but taken as a composite, we get a picture. So,
Right.
so again, I don't want to make a big deal of that. I don't think it's important. And I even asked the Lord, like, why is this important? It's like, no, let me tell you what's important. It's my son. That's what's important, and it's not, and this isn't a case where the two writers, Matthew and Luke, are in conflict. But perhaps our traditions are in error. Even to the point, the tradition is that there's three wise men. It doesn't say that here. It uses wise men plural. They gave three types of gifts, but there could have been more than three. Perhaps if there was a caravan, there was a pretty big crowd. If you're going to caravan across the desert for 1,000 miles, you probably had a whole bunch of porters and an entourage carrying this gold and carrying this myrrh and frankincense. Who knows? It's these details are not given, probably because we don't want to get too far distracted. And so,
Right.
Then I got off and I studied the Epiphany came up, which I was not aware of, because in the denominations that I've been associated with, they don't make a big deal of that. But the Epiphany signified the celebration that Jesus was revealed to not just the Jews, but also the Gentiles, because these wise men represented the Gentiles. And I found that interesting. So it was really not in conflict at all with the scripture. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All these things are interesting. I also found it interesting to, realize that Jesus very obviously was not born in the year zero. That, he was born probably between 6 and 4 BC. So if anything's wrong, it wasn't wrong with, God didn't miss the mark. Just whoever developed the calendar, which was basically the Julian calendar developed by the Roman Empire later, got the date wrong, if anything, So that's another interesting thing. That and the fact that, and this again is all according to my research, which, the sources, there may be falsehoods in the sources, but that Christmas itself wasn't even celebrated till well into the 3rd century. Interesting.
Is that when Constantine came in on the
Yeah,
scene?
it was. Yeah, Constantine was early in the 3rd century when he made the edict of, I believe it was called the Edict of Milan, and basically brought Christianity out from underground and made it legal. And then later on, in another, I think it was the Edict of Thessalonica, where they basically the government recognized the church and supported it. So it was a multi-step process. First, it just became legal to be a Christian. And you weren't going to be persecuted. Later on, the government would basically validate Christianity, and that came with some problems. You would think that would be good news, and it was to an extent, but it was also bad news because the government got their fingers in Christianity and started politicizing Christianity, and the Romans celebrated several pagan festivals that all revolved around the winter solstice, which is right about, we're coming up on it right now. And right about the time that we celebrate Christmas, they had a number of festivals, because at the solstice, the days started getting longer, which so you would look forward to the coming of spring and the planting season. So you had this heathen god called Saturn, who was the god of agriculture. And then you had this another Persian heathen god that was the goddess of light, the longer days. And I think what they did is that is the church tried, in order to make Christianity appealing, they tried to graft it in to these other celebrations. And when they did, we're certain that there would be compromise, just like you were talking. And
Right.
I think the church made a lot of not fatal mistakes, but mistakes when they compromised. You know, the idea was good, like, hey, let's reach out and embrace these other cultures so that we can Christianize them. But in doing so, there was compromise. And like you were saying, those Daniel and his buddies, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they weren't going to compromise. It was life or death, and they chose
Yeah.
death. They chose death. You know, they chose death.
Said, in the furnace, they said, "Our God will deliver us."
Mm-hmm.
But even if He don't, we're not bowing down.
Yep. Yeah. So that was really, think about that in relation to what we've been studying in Philippians 2, just in Philippians, where Paul says to live as Christ and to die as gain. That was a prophetic looking forward to. To me, that's the equivalent of saying to live as Christ and to die as gain. You know, obedient unto death, if that's what it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff. Pretty cool stuff.
I was talking to somebody today. I think it was my buddy Dale. We were talking about trusting God. And when are we actually fully trusting God? And it's not until we completely surrender our will and our life over.
Mm-hmm.
Give control. If we're hanging on to one little bit, then we're not totally, fully trusting.
Yeah.
And the reason why we don't is because we're scared.
Well, and it always happens under pressure. Suffering. I mean, look at the pressure that was going on with those guys in Daniel on two different occasions that we've discussed: the fiery furnace and starvation. You know what I mean? Not to mention to try to go before the king, Nebuchadnezzar, and interpret his dreams. What if he doesn't like the interpretation?
Yeah.
That's it. You know, being a prophet sucked. I mean, you were always having to go tell kings things that they didn't want to hear. When you look back through all those prophets, you know, and so they were under pressure. Joseph was under pressure because think of it like if he went ahead and went through with it, married Mary, Jesus gets born, and all the old biddies start counting the months, counting the weeks. They're piecing it together, right? You know, sooner or later, he's going to be under tremendous pressure socially and legally under the law. You know, they're going to do the math. So he's scratching his head and saying, man, I'm well within my rights to put her away. You know, that's a lot of pressure because, you know, he loved her. Certainly he did. You know, so then you got even Herod's under pressure because if this kid's the king, right, where does that put me?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And he said he was upset, and all Jerusalem with him. Well, that tells me that all the political figures were under pressure, and the priests were under pressure,
and all the people, because now if the king's pissed off, anything could happen.
Anything can happen, and if you study Herod, he was a very volatile character. I think he had something like 8 wives, not at the same time, and he killed the first one and both her sons, Okay. And later on, he would kill another son because he didn't want him to become, his successor. And he was a volatile character, and he was a bad actor. King. He as a king, he was powerful, but he was deadly. He was kind of a lot like we studied Nero a couple weeks back.
Nero, yeah,
yeah, very much so. And he was given the authority by Rome. I think his Judaism was just a political move.
cover up.
Yeah, well, he was, just trying to keep the peace. So, hey, let the priests and the scribes, the Pharisees, let them run that part of it. Keep the peace with the people. As long as the tax money's coming in, the Romans are going to be happy with me. They're going to give me power, And even he went as far as he rebuilt the temple. And made it magnificent, because the first temple built by Solomon got sacked when the Assyrians came in and carted them all away. They leveled it, so he actually rebuilt the temple. So, he was a politician, and so he was scared to death. So he was under pressure. Now these wise men show up. I'm sure they read his hand and said, this guy's got a lot of power around here. We got to be careful with him. So, they went ahead and were trying to comply, and the Lord had to go in there and interrupt that whole situation. Then think of it as, so now, the Lord again has to come to Joseph and say, look, you need to split. You need to get out of here. I'm giving you got the money to travel. You got the myrrh, the gold, and the frankincense. Go to Egypt, another hostile country, historically. They go down there and says, wait down there till I tell you it's okay. Then he tells them it's okay in another dream. And Joseph discovers that one of Herod's boys now was the new Herod, and so the Lord tells him, take the long route back. Don't go back to Bethlehem. Go to Nazareth, Galilee, because Galilee was really like, I think of Galilee as like they were second class. They were part of Israel, but they were a different state, let's say, and they were considered less thans. That's why later on people would say of Jesus, can anything good come out of Nazareth? It's a backwater nowhere town. They're not like us. They're second class citizens down there. They're Sumerians. Interesting stuff. Of course, the Lord had it all set up. The prophets had prophesied that the king would be a Nazarene. He'd come out of Nazareth. Lord got lucky on all that stuff. He got lucky on that star, didn't he?
That's another good point, that the Lord had it set up, just like even now everything's going according to his plan.
Yeah.
Whether we recognize that or not.
Well, let me just jump in on that, because you shook something loose that the Lord kind of told me, and I probably did not review that Sunday, but the Lord kind of told me, look, there's a lot of details I'm leaving out because I don't want you focusing on those details. I want you to focus on the important stuff. So now let's talk about the book of Revelation. Too many people, and probably well-intentioned but wrong teachers on Revelation and students of Revelation think that if we study that hard enough, that we can predict exactly when certain things are going to happen. And I don't think that's the proper use of Revelation. The revelation is just simply the revelation of Jesus himself. And I think a lot of details are shrouded in this apocalyptic language and vision and pictures, so that the Lord, I don't think he intends for us to know exactly the times and all that. He's just saying, be ready, be prepared, and be thankful, be relieved, that we win. The Lord wins, we win. So I think it's the same thing here. It's like the focus is not exactly when Jesus was born, what day, what year. The focus is himself, and that focus was from the very beginning. Let me just go. Let me see if I can find that verse in Micah, because I had never read Micah before at all. Let me see if I can find it real quick. There's Daniel. Interestingly enough, Micah comes after Daniel in the Bible, but it was written 200 years before Daniel, approximately. That's another interesting little tidbit there. Okay, here we go. So Micah 5:2, and this is the verse that the scribes gave to Herod, telling him these details. It says, "But thou, Bethlehem," this is another one of those tongue twisters, Ephrathah, Ephrathah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall come forth unto me, that is to be the ruler of Israel. And this is the best part, whose goings forth have been from of old, from everlasting. I just find that to be, this is it. This is the focus. It's all about him, from everlasting. It started with him. It'll end with him.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there really is no beginning. There really is no end. It's better to be understood as the Alpha and the Omega. He's the Alpha and the Omega, and he came to identify with us so that we could identify with him. And I really think that's the Christmas story right there. And I'm not going to poo-poo all the fun we have at Christmas and all that, but I think that's what it's really all about. That's what the Lord's showing me. That's the Christmas story. He came and identified with us so that we could be identified with him.
I had it explained to me one time. I like to see pictures, and it helps me understand and receive it. It's like, you ever stand over top of an ant pile? Like you're way up here and they're way down there, and there's a bunch of them, and they're so small. It's like, figure the ants is us, and you're God, right?
Yeah.
Well, you want a relationship with those ants. How can you have a relationship with those ants? By becoming an ant.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to get right down in their level.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're looking down, you got that God's eye view. You see the big picture. How big is an ant's world, really? They travel a little bit for food and all that, but that'd be interesting to know how far an ant, a colony of ants, spreads out. I don't know. To them, it seems like the whole world is just there, right there, right? God sees it from up here. It's a whole lot bigger than you guys know about. You're on a need-to-know basis, boys.
We were just watching a thing on YouTube they keep finding more galaxies.
Mm-hmm.
And they're coming to realize that they just keep going.
Right.
There's no end to it.
Right.
So if we have eternal life, how long is eternity? Well, it just keeps going and going. There's no end to it.
That's right. You cannot wrap your mind around it. It's got to be the only way to fully comprehend it is to know what God knows. So it's going to have to be a spiritual revelation. Maybe someday we'll know. Maybe we won't. Maybe we just don't need to. But it's like the mathematicians. You can draw a timeline, that way and that way, but it's infinity. It goes, it's for numbers too high to count. All we know is that we're smack dab right in the middle of it right now.
Right.
Which also means that eternity it's not something that happens later. We're in it right now. It's just that we're not able to totally comprehend all of it any more than we can comprehend the vast expanding universe that we're smack dab in. I'm not saying we're in the middle of it, but perhaps we are.
They were showing all the planets. They were showing the Earth from the moon, and then they showed Earth from Mars, and then it was getting further and further from the other planets, and then they got at the distance from the sun, and they're talking about light years, millions of light years away. It's like, and here it is when you're way back there and you see this one little speck in this big, broad universe.
Right.
And it's like, holy cow.
Well, and like we look up at the stars and we see constellations and we see certain constants, and you can name certain stars and all that, and you can identify them and know where they are, but that's only from our perspective. If you were to go to one of those stars, it would all look different. And two stars that we think are really next to each other may be further apart from each other than we are from either of them. I mean, that blows my mind. And then you talk about light years. There are stars that we can go out and look and see tonight, if it's clear, that are so far away that they may have ceased to exist, but their light hasn't gotten to us yet. That's mind blowing. And I also in my study this week, I found some commentary. It may be true, maybe not, but this star of Bethlehem could have perhaps also been, rather than a lining up of several planets, making it look like a super big star. It could have been also a nova explosion.
Supernova, right?
Or supernova.
Yeah.
A star that exploded so long ago that the light was just coming and still visible to those guys over perhaps a period as long as months, and I just think it's fascinating. And then it talks about, well, the star was in the east, right? Well, the star wasn't in the east. They were in the east. We saw the star. We saw the star in the east. Well, we were in the east is where we were. We saw the star, but the star was in the west if they were going to Bethlehem. Okay, I get that. So it comes up every evening on the horizon. They see it. They get their bearings. Well, it also said after they talked to Herod, they followed the star to Bethlehem, right? Well, and they said that the star actually went before them. Well, that would indicate that the star was actually, maybe traveling. But if it's way up there, it's not going to, it's going to, what I'm thinking is, and these are details that really don't matter, but I'm just trying to make this whole story come alive in my mind. And hopefully everyone else's is that. So it comes up on the horizon, they get their bearings, and as they travel, of course, it naturally comes up, it comes up above them. And now by the time they reach the destination where the child was, it's above them. And that would explain to me, make perfect sense of, it would fit the language of the narrative here that was given by Matthew. That they followed the star, and the star, what does it say here? It says that when they heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. So that's the only way I could explain that story in a way that would be real. I'm not saying that they didn't just follow it, but I think it's just they got their bearings, it came up, and by the time they got to the house, it was above them. Maybe several hours later. And you can watch stars if you sit out at night on a really dark night and sit out, you'll see that, the stars, it looks like they're moving, which is really an illusion. We're moving. I mean, the stars perhaps are moving as well, but we're moving. So it appears that the stars have actually, they'll just like watching the moon or the sun. And it's amazing how fast, like you watch a sunset, how fast it goes down, or a
Yeah.
sunset or a moonrise. It's amazing how fast it is. You just don't get the sense of it until you have a reference point, which is the horizon. You have to have a reference point to really understand how fast the earth is turning. And God set it all into motion. The whole thing.
I saw another one that said where all the planets are aligned, just the way everything is set up, if it wasn't exactly the way that it is, Earth wouldn't exist.
Yep. Things like that, the gravity of various planets, moons, sun, stars, galaxies, creating the atmosphere that supports life as we know it. It's a zillion to one long shot that this could happen by accident. That the idea that life sprang forth from single cell primitive life forms, and that these life forms mutated over time to become multiple cell life forms, and that they reproduce by mitosis, by cellular division, but that somewhere along the line that changed and they reproduced by, rather than dividing cells, joining the DNA. And that would mean that by random chance, mathematical random chance, that these cells that divided by division, mitosis, that became one actually by random chance became a female and the other one became a male, and somehow they hooked up and now reproduce by procreation. Mathematicians can't explain that one. The chances of that are so minute. You really have to have faith to believe that that's what happened. I mean, come on, really? So then you can go, and I know I'm rambling tonight, Jim. Appreciate your patience.
No, it's interesting.
Well, now let's go back to the story of Adam and Eve. All right. So the Lord said it's not good to Adam be alone. I need to make for him a helper that's meet for him or complementary, suitable, that really demonstrates. Really, he was showing himself is what he was doing. God was revealing the Trinity in this whole process. Because he said, let's create man in our image and in our likeness. Well, he said, who's he talking to? He's talking to Jesus and the Spirit. Anyway, so he takes Adam, and the translation is he took a rib out of Adam, and he may have done that because all of Adam's genetic material was contained in every cell of his body. So that he could have used a rib. I like to think that when he took a side of Adam, really, I think really what it was is,
Cut
I think
in half.
we have that DNA, right? It's a double helix,
right?
Creating all of our genetic material. Mathematicians still haven't even explained that. And I think what he did is he unwound that DNA. He just tore it in half, and half of Adam's DNA went to Eve. And Adam retained the other half. And then when their DNA was combined, you had the first natural born child, Cain. I mean, that's, if you can believe that we came from single cell, random chance living organisms and developed into what we are today, I think that's harder to believe than God creating Adam and taking half of his DNA and giving it to Eve, and then recombining the DNA to create Cain and then Abel, and every human being after that. You know, it's, I ramble. Sorry.
No, it's all interesting.
Yeah, it is. But what's the most important fact? What's the most important point? Jesus himself.
Yeah, and what he's accomplished for us,
Mm-hmm.
his sacrifice, what his sacrifice on the cross accomplished. If you think about it, now I was thinking about how God created man knowing we were going to do what we did. We're going to eat the apple.
Mm-hmm.
But he already knows the end at the beginning, so he already fixed it.
Yep. Nothing.
Before he even, it was already fixed before he even created us.
Yep. Yep.
So Jesus was chosen before the foundation, also, just like us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it says it in Hebrews. So,
You know, and I think what the Lord did too is he said, look, I'm going to jerk a knot in the devil's tail. I'm going to create Adam and Eve. He's going to try to destroy it. And he knew all along that he was going to defeat yet again the devil. You know, in spite of the devil's efforts to cause mankind to fall, the Lord was way ahead of the game, like you're saying, way ahead. You know, so no matter how hard Satan tried, the Lord was already way ahead of him. He's way ahead of him now. You know, he's given him plenty of rope and he's hanging himself with it.
So think about it. If you create something with its own free will,
Mm-hmm.
because if you anything less than that would be a robot.
Yep.
We wouldn't have a choice, right? So create something with its own free will, and then also create the dark side, and then let the free will go and see which one it chooses.
Mm-hmm.
So while he continually loves us and goes out of his way to love us and reveal himself to us, we still have a choice to respond.
Right.
And
I think that's what's so gratifying to him is when we respond positively to him and we reject the lies. Even though the lies are so compelling, you know, and they're so ingrained in our conscious mind.
Look at Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Look at Joseph and Mary. Look at the ones the Bible talks about. I think it's in the book of John, how some of them were sawn in two. Probably why they were alive.
Mm-hmm.
They just cut them in half with a saw.
Oh, yeah.
Refusing to bow down.
Right.
They would rather die than.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Hebrews 11 recounts that as well. You know, the heroes of faith.
Yeah.
That takes us into what I'm coming to believe is one of your favorites, Hebrews 12, because it's one of mine as well. And you go back to that very often, I've noticed. You know, being surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
Those that have gone before us.
And nobody made them do that. They freely did that on their own.
That's right.
It doesn't get any better than that.
Yep.
That's what love looks like.
Yep.
And just like Jesus, nobody took his life from him. You couldn't take it from him. He was God. He
Right.
willingly laid it down.
Yep. Like we were talking about, I think it was last week, he emptied himself of his rights, you know, to be worshipped, and he became like us, you know, and he didn't come back as a king. He came back as a poor man, a pauper, you know. And I guarantee you know, his feet hurt at the end of the day, his back hurt just like ours does, and when he was building something and hit his hand with a hammer, it hurt just as much as, you know, ours does. Yeah. He identified himself with us so that we could identify with him. It's amazing, just amazing his grace. And you know, you see it all the way through. I mean, like you were saying with Daniel and those guys, man, his grace was there. He saved them in the midst of it. Oh, and I'll tell you another. You talked about those dreams, you know, and I think there's a connection there. You know, for you and I have studied the Alpha series, and I know I'm certain many of the people listening have studied the Alpha series, and it talks about our subconscious mind and how that subconscious mind is the largest part of our mind, you know, and you know, it really never rests. Even when we sleep, our dreams come out of our subconscious mind, and it's a reservoir for really the mind of our flesh. I just find it interesting that God chose to speak to these guys in their subconscious mind.
Yes.
And literally, when we recover, God is changing us from the inside out, right? So he's also changing that subconscious mind little by little. I just find it very interesting that he did, you know, that's how he dealt with these guys. You know, that's just another little tidbit of interesting.
I think as we do our step 4 and 5, 8 and 9, we deal with personally, I think it's the emotional intensity that keeps us locked into that memory that's in the subconscious mind, because once we do our 4th and 5th and 8 and 9, and we deal with the emotional side of the trauma or whatever it is, that, you know, you still have the memory.
Yeah.
But the emotional part of it's gone now.
Yeah.
And you dealt with it, and it never comes back to haunt you.
Yeah.
Now the Lord, the Holy Spirit, and goodness takes the place of that. Well, I mean, until that happens, we're kind of like locked into that memory, because it's the intensity of the emotion that makes it so traumatizing.
And I really do think that's, you know, we talk about the Lord changing us from the inside out. I think that's a big part of it. You know, that he, like you said, he doesn't erase that memory, but that memory doesn't create the fear in us that it created before. You know, you know, we have the confidence because of who we are, and he literally changes that little by little from the inside out. So that's why I really think that him speaking to these guys in these dreams, he was really, you know, these guys were under tremendous pressure. So what better way to deal with that than to go right to that subconscious mind and change that mind, you know, and you know, it's like, hey, he saved my butt last time. He's going to save my butt in the future, you know. And after a while, you're just counting on it, you know.
And the other thing to point out is they didn't do anything to make that happen.
No, you can't.
They weren't seeking God. They weren't praying. They weren't fasting for 2 weeks. They
No.
weren't.
You can't do that any more than you can change your dreams. Try as you might. Try to dream nothing but those good dreams that you only get once in a while, and not dream those bad dreams that come along, often. Those are all from your subconscious mind, and you can't change. You have no power over that whatsoever. None. But God does. You can deal with that. I mean, that's amazing.
And the dreams and the perception changes with our new identity as our new identity starts taking a hold. We start seeing that new person He's made us to be. The dreams, the thinking, the perception, all of it starts changing with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I told John Glenn one time, I was losing it, man. And I said, man, I feel like I'm losing my mind. He looks at me and he laughs and he goes, "You lost your mind a long time ago."
Yeah.
And what he meant was, when I got born again, I now have the mind of Christ.
Right.
See it?
Let this
So yes, I did lose
also in
that,
Christ Jesus.
that,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Well, Jim, it's been cool tonight. Just you and I, just kind of, not that I don't miss the other guys, but just that we've just had a chance to, like, just two guys talking. So all you guys that are listening, I guess this is what two guys talking looks like, and I enjoy it very much, because it's just two guys sharing the gospel with each other and batting things around, and I think it's just pretty cool to me. I've enjoyed it, and I hope you guys listening have gotten what I've gotten out of it. It's been a good hour for me. Time's flown by. Gosh, I can't believe it.
Yeah. Well, we got quite a few listening
that we know about.
I
see some Merry Christmases there. You want to go through them?
I'll go through them.
Okay.
Patrick's been with us a long time.
Ever faithful, yeah.
John and Carol Small, Merry Christmas to you. Kelly Odom, Darbod, Frank Whiting.
Hey, Frank.
Frank was having computer or something issues, and he was just listening. And I know Martin had just got in. He had a pretty full day. He wasn't able to make it. There's Gail, Barbara Kelly. Love y'all's teaching and conversation tonight, and praise be to God forever and ever. Amen to that, Barbara. Alexander Shipman, Richard and Lisa Schwartz, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to all, everyone listening. That was fun. I enjoyed it too.
Yeah, it's just cool just having a conversation. That's what it's all about, So I don't know what I'm going to talk about next week. We got the kids are going to do a little program and all that, and I'm sure
it's going to be cold, right?
Yeah, it'll feel like Christmas. Yeah, it'll be good.
I don't think it's going to hit 70.
Well, it'll
be in the 60s.
I'll bring some firewood over to the fire pit there we have down at the park there in the pavilion, and we'll huddle up around that and hopefully eat some good food. And just tell everybody that's out there that if you're in the area at all and haven't heard, that after church next Sunday, we're going to have a picnic, and that we've got the meat taken care of. The guys will be cooking on Saturday, and we'll have the meat and the drinks. But if you come, bring a covered dish, a side dish, or a dessert, cookies or whatever. And if you don't have time to do that, just come. Please come, and we're going to hang out Sunday afternoon and have more conversations like we had tonight. Hopefully, one-on-one, in groups and small groups or whatever. So I'm not sure what I'm going to preach on. We'll find out when we get there. Lord will give it to me in time. And, I hope you all are having a Merry Christmas season. And also, I just say from the bottom of my heart, Christmas is a tough time for a lot of people. Family relationships. We got a lot of people that are dealing with loss of loved ones, people that just feeling pressure financially at Christmas time. It's the best time of the year and the worst time of the year for a lot of people. So, hold each other up in prayer. Give somebody that you think needs a hug. Tell a perfect stranger that God loves them and God bless them, and don't be afraid to say Merry Christmas. So next week, same bat time, same bat channel.
Yeah, Lord willing.
I got a cover for Martin. Got a cover. All right.
All right. Good
Adios,
night, all.
friends.